Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the sixth annual Destination Cannabis panel discussion presented by the Lloyd D. Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism, also known as LIGHT, in collaboration with the Cannabis and Hemp Research Institute at Stockton University. My name is Jane Buckinevage, and I'm the faculty director of LIGHT. And our moderator today is Rob Mejia, a teaching specialist in the Cannabis Studies program at Stockton University. I'm looking forward to hearing from our esteemed panel of experts, so I'm going to turn it over to Rob to get started right away. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you to the Light Institute. We've appreciated working with you over the years. So thank you to our audience for joining us as we examine and discuss cannabis hospitality and tourism. I'm your moderator. I'm Rob Mejia, adjunct professor at Stockton University in the Cannabis Studies and Business Department. I'm also the president of Our Community Harvest, which is a cannabis education company. I have written 4 cannabis books, and I'm launching 3 cannabis brands. But my greatest joy in cannabis is helping students enter the industry with knowledge, compassion, and intent. Today's panelists were chosen after great consideration. Each of them sees cannabis hospitality and tourism from a completely different vantage point. These vantage points can be from the perspective of data, operations, regulation, culinary experiences, and more. If we want this sector to mature responsibly and profitably, we all need all 4 perspectives and more in the same conversation. So let's get started and note that each panelist will introduce themselves before they respond to their first question. So I want to start this off with a big question for each panelist. We'll start with Brian Applegarth. So Brian, after your introduction, the question for you is, you built part of your reputation on bringing hard data into what is often a relatively unexplored topic. So what do you think is the most surprising data point that you've uncovered recently about cannabis hospitality and tourism, and why should we care about it?
Great. So, first off, Rob, thanks as always, for all the work you do and for bringing this conversation forward. So, Brian Applegarth, I'm the founder of Applegarth Intelligence. It's a research and intelligence firm that specializes in cannabis and hemp tourism, and also a discipline I call single domain destination stewardship. So, I guess the cliff notes of that is, if there's anything that's complex or confusing for destinations like cannabis or hemp, there's a framework to help navigate that kind of space. And to answer your question, Rob, I think one of the most important data points ties directly into the research I've been doing on the cannabis motivated travel audience in the United States since 2019. So I was very fortunate to team up with MMGY Travel Intelligence, which is a global leader in travel audience profiling. And this is every different type of traveler, what motivates their destination decisions. They are motivated to book trips and go on vacations for certain reasons. And in 2019, I co-authored a survey that was deployed in the United States nationwide to understand who the modern day cannabis motivated traveler is in the US across 3 different segments: the canna-curious traveler, the cannabis wellness traveler, and the cannabis connoisseur traveler, who probably smokes and enjoys hash and more sophisticated connoisseur-like experiences. I think the most important data point that we need to acknowledge, and by we, I mean we as a cannabis industry and a travel industry, is that the cannabis motivated travel audience is a different audience than the cannabis consumer audience. They do overlap, but the motivating factors behind their economic decisions are different. And the current, as far as our data from 2025, which we did last summer, basically end of summer, is that today, meaning then when we got the results back, the cannabis motivated travel audience in the US accounts for 39% of the active leisure travel audience in the US. So out of all the people that travel for leisure or fun or vacations, 39% of those people are motivated by legal cannabis experiences and landscapes. I think a really important fact that drives this home, which is the data point that you asked me to surface, is well, one is that audience equates to about 70 million Americans that are motivated by cannabis experiences while on vacation. And they'll choose destination A that has cannabis lounges over destination B, and they will spend their tourism dollars because of that cannabis opportunity while on vacation. Here's the compelling data point. 24% of that 70 million person travel audience do not self-identify as regular cannabis consumers. They are curious to learn. They might even do an experience that has no consumption at all. They just want to go maybe understand the plant or have access to a cannabis farm and have access to information and knowledge. And so I think that data point is incredibly important when it comes to the cannabis tourism conversation.
I mean, very intriguing. I do find that when people do go on vacation, look for leisure activities, that curiosity definitely leads a lot of things. And oftentimes you'll do different things when you travel than you normally would in your own backyard, your own town, etc. So my quick follow-up question for you, Ryan, is our industry overestimating demand or underestimating demand?
Mm. I would say I think it's underestimating demand. Um, when you say our industry, let me get a clarification question. Do you mean cannabis or tourism and travel?
I know. So they
Both.
both connect, and I guess it's two questions for you. Is our cannabis
Yeah.
industry overestimating, underestimating, and is the whole travel industry overestimating or underestimating?
The highest expression of this travel trend, everything's being underestimated. But if it's not being guided correctly, that opportunity could be missed entirely. And what I mean by that is cannabis is a travel trend that's grounded in well-being and wellness. So when we have campaigns that define the cannabis industry as something that's all about intoxication and getting high, we are leaving out the non-inhalation future, which is wellness, well-being, spa treatments, quality of life applications that can improve the human experience. So I think that I often see the cannabis industry working against itself and being tone deaf to the future of what is needed for cannabis and hemp tourism to thrive. And if we keep down that track, we're going to stunt the industry. I also think that it's really compelling when you talk about resident and visitor spend. A lot of the residents that live in the US, guess what? If they smoked weed before legal weed was legal, they probably have a dealer and they probably go to the underground market. I think that every state with a legal cannabis industry should be over investing on tourism dollars because those people aren't going to get a drug. They're going for an experience. And the modern day platform of experiencing a cannabis lounge that's sophisticated or a shop or an event or a private dinner, that is going to be a sure bet for income flowing through the legal market. And I consistently see destinations miss the boat on this. All the departments of cannabis, whatever, the marketing doesn't speak to the power of the tourism dollar, which I think is a higher conversion rate per marketing dollar spend, I would guess. So I think that, and I think the travel industry is so busy spinning so many plates because it represents an ecosystem of niches, everything from wine to, name a tourism niche, right? It could be a plethora of things. So they only have so much time to understand cannabis and hemp. So that's where a lot of the friction comes, is stopping down to understand the complexity of cannabis versus hemp industry. How do you understand that within the context of the tourism economy? What does that mean? What's legal? What's not legal? So trying to get the attention to get clarity around the landscape and the data behind it with the audience motivators is a feat in itself. And the destinations that do that are able to differentiate and speak to this audience where there's hard dollars attached to what they're willing to spend every year on vacation. So I think that we are grossly underestimating the potential of the cannabis and hemp plant and tourism. How the travel industry and the cannabis industry and the hemp industry all show up and ground in mutual respect and data-driven discussion is going to inform the future of what this becomes. But we have a significant opportunity as a society to uplift well-being, and I hope that we start going more in that direction.
What a great kickoff. We're off to a fantastic start, and we will now go over to Spencer. So, Spencer, after I ask you the question, you can introduce yourself. And you don't just theorize about cannabis consumption lounges, you opened one. So, you've been operating a cannabis consumption lounge attached to your dispensary for 8 months now in a hotbed of tourism, AKA Atlantic City. So, what problem is a lounge solving, and what did you discover once your doors opened?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob, for inviting me. Thank you to Light for putting all of this together as well. Excuse me. So my name is Spencer Bells. I've been working in the New Jersey regulated cannabis industry for 8 years. I started out as a bud tender with one of the original ATCs and have grown grown my way into being the COO of Sunny TN Dispensary and Lounge here in Atlantic City. I'm also a board member of the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association, in addition to being the chairman of the retail and marketing committee with them as well. So Rob, it's a really, really great question. Um, if you asked me 5 years ago if lounges would ever be a thing in New Jersey, not a chance. You asked me 10 years ago if they would be a thing and I'd be running, the first one, absolutely not. While we're 8 months in, it's really hard to get a feel for what problem we're solving and what we're discovering because in a seasonal place like Atlantic City, what we experienced in the fall has been different than the winter. Now we're getting into the spring. We haven't had a proper summer yet with 4th of July. So this is continually growing and expanding and changing. What we've learned so far, relative to what problems we're solving, is we're creating space for people to safely and comfortably to consume cannabis. That is the biggest solution first and foremost. With the way that New Jersey laws are written, you're only allowed to consume on private property where you have permission from that private property owner, in addition to legal lounges. So we're creating a space where people can safely consume, compliantly consume, and not have to be looking over their shoulders for the police to cruise up or the neighbor to come out and yell at you. What we do within these four walls is within our control, and that allows us to solve a variety of problems, underneath of that umbrella. We've really taken the approach to running this as more of a communal space. The lounge is not just a side room that people can go hang out and smoke weed in and, just kind of do their thing with some random tables and chairs in there. The lounge is really not a one-dimensional space either, no matter how you want to categorize it. The way that we've approached it is using this as a blank canvas, as something that we can transform with our partners, whether those are product brands or members of the community, other organizations. We can transform this space to really have it become whatever anybody wants to see it be. Part of that has been the discovery phase. I'm happy to try any event or work with any organization 2 or 3 times to really get a feel for what are we envisioning, how can we design it and execute it, how can we learn from our first event to better recalibrate the second time. By the third time we do an event, it's very well established. It gives us that opportunity to really get our footing, really get our feel, and explore what people want and how we can provide solutions to problems that they didn't even know existed. We've done things like yoga classes that have sold out for the last 4 or 5 months straight now. We just did a Y2K theme brunch this past Sunday and sold out the tickets in about 48 hours, had the room packed. Everybody was high, happy, having a great time. We're really figuring out like what is going to make people want to leave their couch where they can smoke for free and, come hang out in a different environment. So it's, we're taking the approach of less figuring out what problems are we trying to solve as much as what opportunities are we able to create for people.
Fantastic. And a quick follow-up question for you. So, what surprised you the most, either financially, operationally, or culturally, once you opened up?
All of it, honestly. Financially, this is obviously a very expensive endeavor to take on. Depending on your business model, there's some people that can do it, far less expensive than others, but we really wanted to curate an experience and an environment for people here. But the money follows. It absolutely has changed our business model. It's been a huge revenue driver. We knew that it was going to be. It's more so been figuring out how we can make this financially viable for us. And we're still, experiencing hurdles there. Operationally, I'm very grateful that I came from a long background of being a professional musician, building music festivals, running an event company, working in, restaurants, working in retail. I had a lot of hands-on experience that all overlapped to make the lounge what it needed to be. My trial and error of getting the doors, open that first week and really having a good workflow and procedures, we were able to hit the ground running. Part of that was because we had a year and a half of the CRC not allowing us to open, that I was able to go through every little thing with a fine-tooth comb. But operationally, the laws are pretty straightforward, the regulations and the compliance. We had a vision and approach for this, and we're able to, to kind of just rip off the do not enter sign and, let everybody in. Culturally, we're still learning and we're still figuring that out. Our lounge is not for everybody, and that's okay. We can't make everybody happy. We can't cater to every single demographic. There's some people that wish that we had different approaches to things. But at the end of the day, we're focused on providing a high quality experience and a high quality environment. And as soon as it clicks with a certain demographic, that takes care of the rest. Being able to let people explore products in here, try flower for the first time, try edibles for the first time, try dabs for the first time. We're tapping into different aspects of culture, whether that is food, whether that is music and entertainment, whether that is cannabis culture itself. We're constantly being surprised on what people are interested in and what we can make work here. It's always going to be a work in progress as we're carving out new paths in this industry that there is no template for. There's nothing to copy and paste from.
Yeah, absolutely. You're actually creating some of the template right now. So as a
Yeah.
good contrast, let's move over to Jag Gill. So Jag, you can introduce yourself after this question. Like Spencer, you are also a cannabis dispensary operator in the city of Atlantic City. You also have city approval for a cannabis consumption lounge. You have space. You have a potential market, but you're waiting. So Jag, what is it that you are seeing that makes you pause?
Hey everyone, thank you, Professor Mejia, for having me here with you all today. My name is Jag. I'm the owner of Everest Dispensary in Atlantic City. We focus on delivering high quality cannabis experience with strong emphasis on customer service, accessibility, and community engagement. Over time, I have been deeply involved in building not just a retail business, but a destination where people feel comfortable, educated, and connected to cannabis space. I'm excited to be part of this conversation around cannabis experience, opportunities, and careers. What kind of hold us back was just to see how this role will play out. I've been doing retail all my life from day one. Liquor stores, meat markets, laundromats, things like that, and retail been great. But when it came to lounges, it made me pause. Just only thing that we're serving in there is cannabis. There's no second option for you to serve in there. For example, you can't even sell water or food. How much cannabis can one person smoke sitting in a room? That is where it kind of made me stop. Um, and there's no historical data from the past that I can look at, say people have made money or people have become successful in it, and that's what kind of holds me back. And that is the reason why we're just waiting to see what will happen in year down the road. Then we can always get it
Sure.
open.
And your follow-up question is, what would need to change in order for you to say now is the time?
I feel like the food or drinks gets involved, that would be awesome. Then you can do many things with this cannabis with the product, and that would make me say yes if food or drinks were available in there.
And,
That
and
would
what and what a great segue to our next guest, Luisa Rodriguez Diaz, who will introduce herself after her question. So, Luisa, most people who have joined us today have never experienced a cannabis infused meal. Let's talk about this experience. So, when someone attends a cannabis infused dinner, What are they really signing up for? And what makes it transformative rather than just a novel experience?
Thank you, Rob, Professor Rob, for having me here. And so, what makes a cannabis experience? Well, you said it, the word experience, right? So, yeah, anyone who comes to our dinners here at our place is going to have an experience. And that is what it's about. It's not just about, how much cannabis can they consume. We're all about educating as well as comfort, offering a establishment where the atmosphere is very zen, calm, relaxed. It's not just a food experience, which is the best part of it, I think, but it's the overall experience. How are you supporting the people that are coming to the dinner, and in what way? People want to feel safe. They want to feel a sense of being supported, have community. And so I think that's all a part of the experience. And so I've been doing 5-course cannabis dinners across the tri-state area for this is our 6th season. But I've been working with cannabis privately with my clients for about 9, maybe 10 years now. So I've seen such a big use for cannabis in the wellness field, and I come from a wellness background. So that's where we're coming from with Durga Zone Cooking. We're coming from, the wellness yoga aspect of how can we uphold the plant, and respect the plant and show that in a way of, educating people on their consumption, as well as enjoying and have an enjoyable experience with food. So they experience more than just infused food. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So your follow-up question, the question for you is, who should not attend a cannabis infused meal?
Okay, so let's talk about that. Who should and who should not? Well, if you are new to cannabis, I would say it's going to be a great experience, but you should always, have caution. If you're a new, user consumer to cannabis, no pregnancies, no pregnant women should walk through our doors or attend a cannabis dinner. And 21 and up, we're really strict on you know who we're offering cannabis to. There are different types of mental illnesses as well that, schizophrenia, people with schizophrenia shouldn't come to a cannabis dinner. People with extreme anxiety, things like that. So yeah, and even having that on our mind, and knowing that, that's another reason why, we set the tone for these dinners through, the ambiance, the atmosphere. Is it a relaxed atmosphere? Are the lights dim? Are they bright? Is it very active? Is it underactive? So all of those things, all those components play a big role in the overall experience for our dinners as well. So.
And Louise, would you say a couple of quick words about your background, a quick introduction?
Yeah, so I come from an Ayurvedic background. I actually started off doing, cannabis chefing, I would say, with, vegan and vegetarian type food. But I would come from a more therapeutic background. I studied in the ashram, Ayurvedic cooking. So I just really found the connection between Ayurveda and cannabis to just blend so seamlessly together. And and so I've been cooking with cannabis pretty much for a very long time, for a very long time, because I've also been cooking for myself. But we go from high school hangouts and parties, and now we're in 5-course, dinners. So that's my background is all over the place. I don't have any, I would say, culinary school background, but I've taken certifications with edibles and culinary, cannabis and things like that. So really, my background comes from experience, and that's about 30 years of experience with cannabis.
Yeah, well, I personally have eaten some of Louise's food, and it was absolutely delicious, well presented, fun, great environment. So I know how good you are. Let's move to the state of the industry. So, Brian, from a destination strategy perspective, where does cannabis hospitality stand in 2026? Are we early stage? Are we growth stage? Are we stabilizing?
Um, so I think it's moved on from novelty, depending on the market. So, markets that are more mature, I'd say the markets that have lounges, that kind of first mover novelty opportunity suite is getting shorter and smaller quicker. Um, I think that, that's from the destination perspective. I think that that's happening. You have certain recognition and programs now with destinations. I've worked with about 25 in a capacity that is, for the services that I offer. And been educating for years now, some task forces. So I think there's a working knowledge base on the destination side. I think the first mover opportunity suite is narrowing. I also feel like that is within the context of shifts. And what I mean by that is, I think it's really important that we continue to broaden the knowledge of the cannabis industry, of how we represent this plant and how we represent this plant in tourism. And what I mean by that is starting with the seed and the nutritional value of a hemp seed and a cannabis seed, and what that means from a health and wellness point of view, and how the fan leaves can serve as a power green, and juicing. So we cannot neglect the responsibility that we have as an industry to represent this plant in a fully factual way, so we can actually unpack one of the most ancient, complex, incredible plants that was put on this earth. We cannot lean into rushing it and getting hypnotized by market caps and money. We need to slow down and make sure that, I think, as a hemp and a cannabis industry, that we are ensuring that we are representing the plant in its full capacity to uplift quality of life and well-being. So while that opportunity niche closes, where people want to talk about smoking weed in a lounge or going to a cannabis event and hitting a dab, love it, get why it's intoxicating and fun. It's also important to recognize that the most ancient history of that use of cannabis was cannabis as a catalyst to connect with the divine, and what that means and the reverence around that. So when it's flippant and we kind of ride it till the wheels fall off because it's so fun and intoxicating, it's not really accurate. And I think we're not doing a service to the long-term arc of this industry as a toolkit, meaning that plant as a toolkit from seed to fully harvested flowers, or male plants as well in their capacity, to really represent it. So I think we need some really strong cannabis and hemp industry education. And we need to make sure that the associations that are being led in this industry are being led with the right intent, I guess, and so we can intersect with industries like tourism and travel and hospitality. So the opportunity window for the first mover stuff is getting more and more narrow by the day, but there's still a lot of opportunity there, depending on how we educate and how we reach out olive branches to new industries and represent the plant that we should all look at ourselves as stewards of. And what is the highest expression of that for quality of life for human beings? That should be the North Star. So if we're able to work in that direction, the opportunity suite is going to continue to unfold, because we haven't even scratched the surface of mainstream understanding of all the capabilities of this plant. When it comes to the cannabis industry, I think there's so much opportunity still. I see a lot. There needs to be, I think there needs to be more coordinated information sharing and data sharing around lounges and experiences, because I talk to lounges out here in California that they just don't even see the value. And so I think part of that is making sure that as a cannabis industry, we also understand that there's commodities, products, and services, which are really based on commoditization. And then those are three different economies. And then you have the experience economy and the transformation economy, which is all about customization and experiences, to Luisa's point. And, you're buying a ticket for an experience that sometimes isn't just a novel experience where you're doing an Instagram. Sometimes it's literally transformative. And then you get into this conversation about integration and all these really important things that are part of the entheogenic tourism ecosystem that is now in the mainstream sphere in a lot of places. So the window's narrowing, but it also is largely dependent on how the travel industry, the hospitality, and the cannabis and hemp industry act as stewards for the greater good of what this could be for quality of life, for communities and destinations and humans.
I'm glad you made the point about how you're communicating your message and what you're focusing on in order to reach your audience. And now we're going to turn it over to Spencer and then Jag. Same question. Since dispensaries are really the cornerstone, or at least the start of a lot of cannabis hospitality opportunities, the question I have for you both is, what does a healthy dispensary operation look like today? What margins are you seeing? Who are your customers? And what growth patterns do you see?
Yeah, so I mean, health is relative, especially in a state like New Jersey, which has the highest, density per square mile of any state in the country. The dynamics and the nuance that we're experiencing in the Jersey market relative to the age of this market, health is relative. For a lot of people, that health is keeping the doors open. For a lot of other people, they're doing, 10, 15, $20 million a year. We're still in our infancy here in Jersey. There's a lot of pieces that are essential to our market that aren't in place yet. There's still some regulations that haven't been properly rolled out. There's a desperate need for a bigger variety of suppliers, cultivators, and manufacturers in the state. The biggest, if I were to answer this in the most honest way, the healthiest dispensaries in New Jersey are those that have a good level of differentiation. It's those that have built out a business model with intention to set themselves apart from the other competing dispensaries. If you're not different than your neighbors, you're going to get lost, especially somewhere, like this state where only about 30% of municipalities have opted in for retail operations. There's a lot of close congestion, Atlantic City being the best yet worst example of that. If you're not actively working to stand out from your competitors, then you're really not competing at all. So a healthy dispensary is going to have a comfortable environment that people can walk into. They can feel safe. They can feel supported. They don't feel taboo that this is still federally illegal, but illegal in Jersey. You want them to want to walk into your store. You want to have a staff that are, very, very knowledgeable, but very grounded and build rapport with your customers. You want to have that type of experience where you walk in and you remember that Bob bought the blueberry haze from Brighter Side, and you want to know, like, hey, how did that work for you? Did that help you sleep? Building that rapport and building that connection with your customers is what keeps bringing people back. And Brian has talked about this a little bit, that so much of what we do here is the same thing as so many of these other, retail and hospitality industries, and treating your customers well and giving them the care and attention that they deserve is no different in cannabis relative to anywhere else. And then the other third big pillar of a healthy dispensary is your product selection. You need to curate your menu. Bringing in products that are the cheapest, bringing in products that are going to have the highest volume. A lot of that stuff doesn't actually translate to long-term success. You need to pay attention to what customers are organically walking in your door and what you can provide for them to keep them walking back in if they've already chosen you as, their local dispensary. You also need to take a look at what demographics are not visiting your dispensary and how does that fit in with the identity and the mission that you've created for yourself. In a place like Atlantic City, where there is so much competition here, not only just like hyper geographically, where I have 3 dispensaries within a block and a half in any direction, one directly across the street. I've got little pockets on the north and central sides of the island as well, who aren't necessarily my competition in the sense that somebody's going to walk from store to store 35 blocks. But people will jump in their car and they will drive to the place, or they will stop while they're driving past it. So you need to make sure that you have a different selection of products from your neighbors, also bringing in those products with intention. Margins are really tough in a state like New Jersey. We're very conscious of what and how we discount, because I don't want my, pre-COGS margins to dip below 35%. If I'm giving away more than 15% of the out the door price on my product, I'm just bleeding out any potential revenue that I can reinvest to continue to grow and expand on what I'm currently doing, whether that's my staff or my menu or my operations with the lounge. But that being said, there's some stores that are in a better position where they can eat more of their margin and make up for it on volume. So there's really no black or white for that, because you have to take a different approach of what your neighbors are doing. Otherwise, you're playing the same game. One store has 30% off the entire menu every day. The other one's running 35, which means that the other dispensaries then going to bump it up to 40% off, and nobody's actually making money. They're bringing in enough revenue to pay their team, keep the lights on, and they're most likely months and months and months, if not tens of thousands of dollars behind on paying their bills for their product supply. So you really have to kind of just take one step back to be able to take 2 steps forward. Who are your customers, and what does that growth pattern look like? We're seasonal. So what I'm doing in January is going to be a very different game from July. In January, I'm seeing much more of that local consumer base. But in July, I have people from truly all over the world that are walking into my store, who have very different levels and understandings of what cannabis is as a plant, what it is as a medicine, what it is as a consumer good. Every day you just have to take a look at what's working, feed into it, while being conscious of what's not working and what new opportunities are presenting themselves. Otherwise, if you think that this is a copy and paste game, you're going to lose every single time.
And Jag, what would you like to add to that part of the conversation, since you also run a dispensary?
Spencer, wow, he almost said everything correct. There's nothing left for me to say there. Like he said, you can't copy and paste. You gotta create your own clients, own customer base. You have to work towards that. You have to stand out. You gotta get creative. You cannot be. It's not an average retail business. You gotta be creative. You gotta be on your toes. Your team has to be on their toes. Your team has to know what is in the back stock. They should be able to speak whole menu from top of their head. Like those are things that are gonna make you stand out. That are gonna make you grow. A tourism pattern. Tourist. I feel like we're barely a year into this. So last year we opened on November. We didn't get much for the summer last year. So this year we'll kind of understand where we're going. But the tourists, they keep coming. Our aim is to focus on local, because 8 months you're depending on the locals. You got 4 months where tourists comes in, and when the tourists come, they'll spend the money. But 8 months is your local. So if you're not standing, the locals are with you, it's going to be tough for you to survive or stay in this business for a long time.
And Jag, what is one cannabis dispensary regulatory change that you would like to see?
I would like to see from 1 ounce to like 3 ounces.
Limit on possession of ounce.
Limit on carrying, yes. I feel like that would help a lot, because often we get people asking to purchase more, like every day. We get that question all day, every day. So that'd be the one thing I think it will help people a lot.
I will say that it's also interesting when you go in the dispensaries with the 1 ounce limit, and then somebody wants some flour, and they may want some concentrates, and then maybe they want something else, and the calculations that have to go into all of that really is something to witness firsthand. Spencer, would you answer the same way about a regulatory change?
Yeah, I mean, I think any dispensary would be in favor of that. If somebody wants to spend more money, why would I ever tell them no? Even if it's just for an extra 1 gram pre-roll, like $5, $10, $20, I'm never going to deny that opportunity. There is a strategy to, well, if they can only buy an ounce, it makes them come back more. But this is retail. Convenience is key. If as long as I'm getting you to come and spend money with me, I'm happy. We can strategize past that, but I never want to have to cut somebody off. But Jag brought up probably my biggest focus right now, which is food and beverage. With the Canada Business Association, we're currently in the process of sending recommendations to our Senate President Nick Scutari about allowing us to sell prepackaged food and beverage in all retail, not even just in lounges, but in all retail. Obviously, those with lounges are going to probably benefit the most from that because then that truly makes us hospitality. Anything that you call hospitality has food and beverage involved in some capacity. It's really not a hospitable environment if I can't even legally give you a bottle of water. It's not that I can't sell it to you. I cannot even give you a bottle of water. So incorporating food and beverage is one of the largest priorities. But a lot of the other things that we're focused on with the CBA is rolling back unnecessary restrictions. There's a lot of things that we do that on a daily basis, Jag and I get asked, well, why can't we do this? And you go, well, it's the law. It is what it is. And those laws are not necessary. They're not benefiting anybody. We're almost 4 years old in this market on the legal side. I've been in this market for 8 years, and we've seen that a lot of the fears and concerns don't have the proper evidence or backing to justify them continuing to be in place. We were trying to take a look at a lot of the marketing restrictions that we have. Not being able to advertise on a billboard as a dispensary in Atlantic City is a massive missed opportunity for us. How many millions of people are driving down the Parkway and the Expressway on a daily basis, year round, but especially during the summer, that have no idea we even exist? So much of my business comes from people standing in the middle of the Tropicana who are directly next door, Googling dispensary near me. They see Sunny Tea and Lounge, right next to it, and they go, oh, great, it's a block away. This is awesome. But imagine how much more organic business I could pick up. Not that it's organic if they see advertisements, but, the organic business and awareness that would happen if I could have billboards, in the proper places, being able to add, we were able to get the advertisement restrictions on TV, radio, and streaming changed to where you can now advertise 24 hours a day instead of just 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. We're waiting for the CRC to build additional compliance restrictions with that. But, anything that we can do to further get our name out there only helps us to feed into the general awareness of our existence, but also having lounges. That awareness is everything because most of the hospitality ecosystems that exist don't even know that we're here. And they're very, very cautious about wanting to get involved with us because we're still federally illegal, number one, which puts them at a potential risk. Number two, they don't know anything about our industry in general, let alone what lounges are and how to incorporate them. And a lot of upper management, is just a certain demographic of people that were, raised being told that cannabis is the devil and it's as bad as heroin. So to be able to convince them and to show them that there's opportunity here and you can be a part of this, it's really hard when we can't even operate in a similar standard that they can on the marketing and advertising, the retail restrictions, the food and beverage. It puts us in a limited spot where even if Tropicana wants to work with me, they look at this and go, yeah, it's great, but we can do so much more over here way easier. And that limits us greatly. So my biggest focus is, obviously food and beverage, but rolling back restrictions that make our life more difficult. That's going to allow us to properly grow into the potential that we should have. And then from there, we'll really be able to see, okay, what needs to come next to push that envelope further.
Yeah, such good points, and I'm glad that you continue to advocate for those commonsensical changes. I am also wondering if one of the new NJCRC members, Harris Laufer, who used to be on staff with Scutari, I wonder if he will kind of help move things along. I am hopeful. I do hope it happens.
We are hopeful as well. Yeah, we've been getting really, really great communication from the CRC and from the state Senate and Assembly. They recognize that there's a lot of improvement that needs to happen. And it's not, we're trying to reshape that mentality from, oh, cannabis needs to help to we are a market here of 300 retail operators, dozens and dozens of suppliers the majority of them are owned, by individuals. They're mom and pops, most of which are minority owned, women owned, veteran owned. We are true business owners that are out here suffering. And we need, that mentality that we're just a bunch of people like Jag. He is a normal human being. He doesn't come from some, multi-million dollar, corporation or anything. Like, he's a real person that has run businesses successfully to be able to take on this venture. But now he's at the point of like, all right, I've sunk all this money into it, but I have all of these hurdles and barriers in my way. And, we just want to make all of our lives easier. That's really the main focus. So we're hoping that the state sees that this is really a market of small business owners, again, mostly minority and women owned, that need this help and support, as opposed to just, well, cannabis is being treated special, or they're getting, a bunch of, concessions made. Like, no, we're just a new industry that needs the help. So, it's great to see. We will have a fifth CRC commissioner on this next meeting, on Tuesday. And, we're hoping for some fast-paced changes across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And now let's switch over to Louisa. So, and we'll go back to consumption lounges again. So, how does your business work with consumption lounges? And what would make any partnerships easier?
How does my business work with consumption lounges? It's an interesting question because, pretty much I'm mimicking a consumption lounge, with our dinners is what we're doing. Providing a safe space for people to come and consume their medicine, but also enjoy it in a way that they may not have enjoyed, on their own or, anywhere else, feeling safe, feeling, feeling like you're in an environment where you're supported by like-minded community, I think is also important. It's not just about, how high we can get in the food, though I do, it is a food experience. Lounges, as far as, there's no serving food in lounges, so there's no relationship there. But, I see that changing, along with everything else, everything's evolving. I started this out in COVID. We started doing dinners once a month here at our place during COVID. And so there was a big sense of needing connection, so, and that had nothing to do with cannabis, it's just the connection of people coming together, community. So I see a lot of the same people coming into our dinners, and we've built a lot of community through our dinners over the last 5 years. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to get into, having these relationships with lounges. Lounges are still very new and evolving. So I'm hoping that our relationship, with food and lounges will also evolve in that way. I think there's a lot of education that could be done there, and I think there's some great opportunities for me as a chef to, do events, hint, Spencer, in in lounge environments, continuing to educate people and destigmatize cannabis, So yeah.
All right. And so, Brian, let's go to consumption lounges again. And from other states or countries, what kind of lessons can we learn? What is working? What limits success? And what should New Jersey be paying attention to? Because I know you travel all over the place. I see you travel globally, and clearly you work with the lounges across the country.
Yeah. I think the first thing I want to share is like, from a destination perspective, there's a destination brand and there's a strategic roadmap for New Jersey or for California or for a city. So understanding who the target audience profiles are for travelers that are already built into the travel economy of New Jersey, and understanding the strategic priorities of New Jersey, and then understanding how the cannabis sub-brand can weave into the strategic priorities and marketing priorities is kind of like a cannabis industry community lift. When I see individual lounges, and I've seen this a million times, try to make an individual play with an individual hotel delivery service, it flops, because you have to approach a destination from a brand community perspective. And what is the Like when somebody thinks about a New Jersey cannabis experience, what are the 3 audio bites that I'm saying out here in California? And how is that unique to the New Jersey experience, and where does cannabis fit as a destination brand? So I think that's a really healthy exercise to go through. And when it comes to lounges, I think what I'm most excited about is I kind of look at them as blank canvases or slates, and cannabis can really come alive in these special ways, right? So um, I'm going to narrow it down to a couple things that I'm most excited about that I see. One is the arts. I'm a big fan of the arts and culture scene in general, from poetry to musicals to spoken word to dance. And I see a lot of stages in these lounges, and it's becoming this creative performance. I think that's incredibly aligned with the inspirational nature of, cannabis and entheogenic effects and activated THC at the right dosing and the right cultivar for the right moment. So I really like the idea of creating a space for human expression. I think this is going to get more and more important as AI and robotics weave into our culture as a society, and the commodity economies of product, services, and commodities get optimized with AI. I think the experience economy and the transformation economy is going to get a lot more human energy allocated toward it. And I think that's going to express itself in the arts. So I love the idea of cannabis becoming a hub for a whole different kind of intimate, expressive form. So I would really encourage, that intersectionality with the arts and culture. And what that does is it brings cannabis lounges out of the conversation of cannabis lounges. And all of a sudden, you're part of the arts and culture offering for your destination, alongside museums and alongside, the theaters. And so I think those authentic moves are really important. The other thing that I think is really important for lounges to hone in on, and again, this is all just data driven, sharing information, not necessarily strategic advice, but I'm constantly compelled by the research we've done over 5 years now about the connection of cannabis effects to arts and culture, nature, and culinary experiences within the destination. And those don't have to live within lounges. There's this concept of, what does effect pairing cannabis look like? What strain are you taking? What beverage are you drinking? What gummy are you taking? What's your experience level? And how is that a precursor to potentially enhancing your experience and bringing you into the present moment, and elevating that destination experience that might be the restaurant down the street, or that little foodie truck stop, or finding your way to a really cool arts and culture. And know what that does is it starts giving you a conversation to communicate out to your community about how cannabis has a direct dotted line to these other facets and other spokes on the wheel for the travel economy. And I think that's where cannabis can really slot in. This is also the stages are constant, I see now, which is great. This effect pairing is, we got to keep getting the data out, because this is a really powerful story to tell around how humans are. I always say kind of cannabis is the new vermouth, right? I mean, everybody kind of knows it's an appetite stimulant, or a lot of the strains are, that have certain chemical compounds in them. And what does it look like as an industry to start positioning this in a way that's relatable, including non-inhalation, as a precursor to a Michelin star meal and things like this. So I think when I see lounges, I see activation spaces, and I think you should think of it in terms of 50% of those, yes, consumption, 25% of that 50, THC, let's say rich, meaning 1 milligram to whatever. 25% of that 50%, let's call it all just non-altering, CBG, CBD, CBN. Let's inform people. And then the other 50% of programming, I would really encourage to just have these amazing, inspiring, ticketed experiences where somebody might buy a ticket on vacation to go learn about Cannabis 101, and they might pay $50 for that ticket, and they might end up leaving with a t-shirt and a keychain. And it might be in $100 basket without selling 1 gram of weed. So I think that this is where I'm hoping the data that we've been aggregating for 5 years now on the cannabis motivated travel audience can open up these discussions. And I think the last part about lounges I want to say is the opportunity for lounges to continually figure out how to, and whatever association or organization this comes through, but really invest in that industry level education, right? So hotels, like one of our data sets in this research we've done is getting a temperature check on.
Unfortunately, Brian froze just when he was at a very interesting point. But I bet he was going to say to look at the demographic of who's in the hotels. Right, Brian, are you back with us? So you froze up right as you said,
Yeah.
start to dial in on the hotel.
Yeah, I was going down a rabbit hole, but there's a whole data set around that we have around what is a cannabis friendly hotel and what hotels are going to get that booking for an overnight stay if they train their staff to not be totally tone deaf to a cannabis interested traveler. And something else that I want to say out loud just for some of the panelists here too is the negative impacts of not preparing your destination, right? Like one little example that I've come across in my work with destinations is, you know, a hotel guest that has a Michelin star meal they've been looking to, they've had that booking for months. They go to the wrong dispensary where hospitality isn't a priority. They get a 20 milligram edible or whatever, and all of a sudden they're canceling their dinner plans. That's lost revenue. That's brand tarnish on the destination itself. So there's these case studies too of like, when you're not intentionally integrating and developing an industry that's paying taxes, employing residents, part of your community, part of your destination experience, and whether you like it or not, it touches your brand. So that's all, when you greenlighted this industry, that was part of that contract that was made. You got to figure out how to work together as good stewards of your destination and your community. And I think that hospitality discussion is really important because it engages. I believe that travel and tourism today is what medical represented in the 90s. Medical really moved the needle with the HIV/AIDS epidemic and understanding cannabis as a medicine and all the applications of that out of the counterculture kind of Cheech and Chong era, right? And I think the next evolution of this industry is this like above board, now we branch out, and that experience economy above and beyond a transaction at retail is where this new market really thrives. And the beauty of it is you have these partnerships where they will be forged, whether, and I think of terms of travel. So I think of hotels, airlines, you know, all the different spokes on the wheel, the attractions, rental car companies. There's this whole economy. The travel economy globally is about $11 trillion, $10 to $11 trillion. So what does it look like when cannabis and hemp start integrating into this $10 to $11 trillion global market? Which takes me back to like, okay, let's zero in on New Jersey. How big is the tourism economy? And when they started building the cannabis industry in New Jersey, let's just imagine that tourism matters in New Jersey, right? So when you build a new industry, thinking about how you're enabling innovation and evolution that leans into your strengths, like, is really important. So that goes way beyond your question, Rob, but that's, you know, lounges matter. And this is a really exciting time.
Certainly marvelous food for thought, and to look at the human element, which is always crucial, and the community element. And you talked about the experiences. I think those are very good talking points for both Jag and Spencer to consider what they are going to do with their lounges going forward. I do know that a number of people who have joined us today are interested in getting into the business, and they're interested in getting into the cannabis hospitality and tourism business. So my question for all of the panelists is, what level of investment is required to enter the cannabis hospitality and tourism industry today, and what are the biggest risks?
I think that there's a lot of variance in that, because you can build something mobile the way that Louisa has, where she can take a blank space and she can transform it into something else. All things considered, you can do that relatively cheap as compared to opening a retail dispensary and, legal consumption lounge, which is probably going to cost you, $2 to $3 million when all is said and done through, fees and legal and application and build out and, furniture, $5,000 worth of glass bongs. Like, to be able to do something like this, you have to be liquid with millions ready to go. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach the hospitality side of cannabis. You can open a coffee shop that just so happens to be your private property that you can allow people to consume cannabis in. There's a lot of variables that go into that, but I think people first need to understand what is their level of investment that's available and what is the best way to utilize that to meet their goals. Because opening a dispensary and a lounge is not for everybody, and I don't often recommend it to people unless you're prepared to run two different businesses that, while yes, are under the same license and feed into each other, they are entire different identities and different operations. And that's not for everybody. But then there's a lot of people that go, oh, I can do what Louisa does. And it's like, no, you cannot. There is a whole different world to that, and understanding of what you're bringing and what you're preparing and what you're creating that doesn't have the same sense of stability that I do. I have a physical location. I have everything I need in these four walls. It's a very different world. So I recommend everybody looking at it backwards. What money do you have to work with? Build something within your means, because otherwise, if you go all in on a great cannabis idea, but you haven't done the proper market research, you haven't understood, what voids are you filling, what consumer demographics exist, how you can tap into the rest of the ecosystem that exists around you, you're going to pour a lot of money into something that's not going to work, because everything that we build is being built in real time on a daily basis. And what Louisa was doing in her first season 5+ years ago versus what she's doing now is very different. Not only has she learned, hands-on and experienced things in real time to continue to recalibrate her approach and make improvements, the market is different. When she started, this wasn't recreational. This was a very, very different world for her to tap into. So, you really want people to understand, like, if you're going to invest your money, what do you have and where does that money need to go that's going to give you the best return? You can't just look at, the avenues that have been carved out by us already and follow one of them. You're most likely going to have to carve your own no matter which direction you go into. Even when Jag goes and opens his lounge, whether that's, if I can get, food and beverage legal in 3 months, that'll be great for him. But, maybe he waits another year or two. He's going to take a very different approach and have a very different business model to his lounge than my lounge. We are in different geographical places of this city. We're serving very different demographics of people, and we have different spaces to be able to work with. So even just something as simple as opening a lounge has countless variables that need to be taken into consideration.
Absolutely. Ryan, is there an easy answer as to what is one of the least expensive things you can do in the cannabis hospitality and tourism world?
Yeah. I mean, when I always think of like quickest path to entry for quality of life. So kind of like other end of the spectrum, probably. So yeah, I mean, I think of a great dispensary and lounge with an owner that's value aligned with you. And if you have some working knowledge of the endocannabinoid system and the cannabis plant and the different methods of ingestion, and you want to share that with the world, I think approaching a dispensary like Jags or Spencer's and saying, hey, every Friday and Saturday, can we start a program where I give an hour-long tour of your dispensary, and we could tell all the hotels that, you have this walking thing where we walk around. If they want, they can buy product, and maybe you even take them to the art gallery that's down the street as part of that experience. And, when they arrive, it's a hospitality experience. Who's visiting from where? What brought you in today? What questions do you have before we start walking around and showing you all these products that are so exciting about this? And you get to see the inside of a real lounge, that kind of stuff. And a curated, perhaps ticketed experience. I don't know the laws out in Jersey well enough, but this is another revenue stream, I think. And I think of the data capture. What's that exit survey? All of a sudden, you're collecting information, not just on your retail transactions with IDs and zip codes. You're getting real information that you can reapproach your destination organizations and local government and your hotel stakeholders with and say, hey, I've been doing tours of my dispensary for the last year. And so I think from the tour guide point of view, if you have a little bit of working knowledge, you can do something, you step into it immediately with the right dispensary owner that sees the value, which ties back into that cannabis travel audience data. It really does start there, because that's the economic case. Is there are 70 million Americans that are willing to spend thousands of dollars every year in a destination that offers a cannabis experience. And let's just say, 300 of that is going toward that cannabis experience and the value that that brings, right? From marketing to selfies, people that are traveling back to wherever they came from and sharing the story about how they did this amazing experience and went in this lounge and then they ate this gummy and then went and had a meal that was amazing. So I think that's the easiest step in for somebody that's looking for like a light path forward. You might want to go to somewhere like Stockton or, get some education or certification under your belt to give you that one kind of extra validation that you're ready to do this for owners like Spencer and Jag, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, it's very hard to believe, but we are right at time. But I also always like to finish with more of a personal question to get to sort of see a little bit of your personality as we exit here, and then Jane will wrap us up. But my final question for all of you is, have you ever personally participated in cannabis hospitality and tourism? And what has been your favorite event or experience, and what made it memorable for you?
Louisa, why don't you go first?
For me, oh, go ahead, Spencer.
Okay. Or I could speak, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, as far as hospitality tourism, I mean, everything we do is hospitality within our, you know, within our four walls here. I mean, we also do women's cannabis retreats. So that's been the last 2 years us doing. I think we did about 4 retreats. So I mean, hospitality I only see growing. And I find with education, and I find if places like Spencer's lounges and just dispensaries in themselves would learn to, work together and work with freelancers and people that can, show more of that hospitality within the lounges. I mean, we get, people that come from Pennsylvania, from Delaware, from Connecticut, traveling hours just to come to one of our dinners. That's a 3-hour dinner. So, I mean, it's there. People want the experience. People want, to be more in a cannabis experience scene, whether it be a dinner or experiencing a lounge for the first time. So I think the hospitality is only going to grow. And just to touch on some of the subjects that Spencer and Jag were even talking about, I think food and, beverage are going to play a big role in that. So I'm excited to see how it all evolves and pans out within the next couple of years. But yeah.
Anyone else with the personal experience? And
My-
this can also be you as a guest too. It does not have to be you serving other people as well. Go ahead, Jack.
My experience was the dinner that we had at the Stockton CBD dinner that I think Luisa cooked that night. That was awesome. That was a great experience. Food was great, and the way the whole thing, A to Z, it was awesome. It was perfect.
Yeah, that was such a good example of community because, of course, people are relaxed during the meal. You exchange stories, you connect with people. People are happy. I'm with you. I thought that was a very nice event.
Yep.
I'm pretty fortunate that I get to have some pretty cool cannabis consumption experiences on a daily basis. It's it's less about me being on the service side and more me being on the curation side. It's very fulfilling for me to see everybody coming and having a great time and enjoying themselves in this space. Being a part of that it's just as enjoyable as sitting in one of these chairs and sitting there smoking with them, because you're creating something new, you're creating something different, and something that's going to be their favorite memory, the way that Rob, you and Louisa have done your own events and left Jag having that as one of his favorite memories. Like I'm on that same side where I want people to walk out of here and just go, holy, that was incredible. And being able to have that stick with them and resonate with them. I've consumed cannabis on a daily basis for over a decade. So I've smoked on a, 5,400-foot tall mountaintop in Washington State, stuff like that is cool for myself, but being able to share this with other people is really what is the most fulfilling part of cannabis consumption and cannabis hospitality.
Any personal experience for you, Brian?
For me, it's like, so in California, you have all these old hippies that are like, that kind of pioneered some of this medical legalization. And I was super fortunate. About 12 years ago, I ran into Pebbles Trippett, who there's a law that's called the Trippett Standard that protects your right to carry what you can medically legally possess. And then that she introduced me to Dennis Perone, who's the father of medical marijuana. And I spent a lot of time with Dennis at the Castro Castle, where it's like you walk into this vault of history with these visionary, kind of crazy but amazing, like original, like 1970, early 70s that fought, where Dennis was arrested 26 times and shot, and the guy that authored Prop 215 that re-legalized. So I'd say that spending time with Dennis and Pebbles, and I think the extension of that for me up is to the small farmers of the Emerald Triangle, and spending time with these communities where you feel the presence. I call it a place of source region, because cannabis, I think something I love about cannabis is it really shifts your perception of time and space. And you can feel that permeate throughout Mendocino and Humboldt County, where the way people live, you could feel that influence of cannabis, of just being present in nature, and the allowing that is with time. And there's this freedom that settles in when you get up there. And I do believe it's because they've been working closely with the plant for generations. And my favorite moments are kind of getting totally lost in time and conversation with some really colorful characters in the Emerald Triangle as well.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and sounds like might be a good basis for a book for you down the road, Brian.
Yeah.
So we did get a couple audience questions. Sarah, would you let us know what the audience would like to hear, and then we will wrap up.
Absolutely, Rob. I'm happy to present some questions, and I think some of these are flowing off of the conversations that have already happened. Hello, for those that don't know, my name is Sarah Grady. I'm the Assistant Director of Light. I'm happy to help moderate today. So the first question that came up is from an anonymous attendee. They're saying that for consumption lounges, is there a shuttle service provided, or thoughts of hiring a professional bus service? And this is specifically for Atlantic City.
So there's no services that are currently in place. A lot of the casinos are pretty anti-cannabis, as we take away from, multiple points of their business model. Number one, keeping people inside those four walls. And number two, spending money there specifically on alcohol. I have reached out to every single one, and those conversations either never get started or kind of get left in the inbox. But we personally will go and rent shuttles for different events. So we are the title dispensary sponsor for MJ Unpacked, big cannabis convention coming to Atlantic City for the third year in May. And we will have 2 shuttles that are running back and forth from the Hard Rock to the dispensary and lounge for probably about 40 hours over 3 or 4 days. That way we're making it as easy and accessible for people to go from the convention to explore, our dispensary and lounge. So that's something that we take on. We build that into our COGS. We incorporate that into our business model. We try to make it, Atlantic City as accessible for people as possible.
And Spencer, do the drivers have anything like any of your menus, or are they knowledgeable enough to tell people kind of what to expect in the dispensary, or really it is just get them there? And then
they're a hired service. Their job is to get people to and from. I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue to work with private businesses like that, the Jitney Association of Atlantic City, and really incorporate them into the ecosystem that we're trying to build. But again, it's a little backwards, because we're trying to infiltrate their ecosystems that already exist. And, a lot of the businesses and organizations around here take the mentality that we need to step into what they've done already. Instead, we really need them to step into what we're trying to build, because we're playing a very different game, and either they can take advantage of what we have to offer, or we're only going to get a small sliver of what's possible if we have to play the game that they've created already.
Okay. The next question, I believe, was flowing off of Louise's conversation about who perhaps should or shouldn't attend one of these dinners, who perhaps should or should not consume. The question is, there is a law in New Jersey that a bar, that is a bar serving alcohol, cannot refuse to serve a pregnant person due to discrimination. do consumption lounges have the same challenges? Do they have the same restrictions?
There is no definitive law relative to the Cream Act stating anything about that. We as a legal entity, every consumer signs a general liability waiver when they come into the lounge, most specifically stating that they are choosing to be in the room where there is, open smoke. They are choosing to consume, and if so, how much. It removes all of that liability off of us to where, while we might not recommend that any pregnant person inhale smoke of any kind, whether from a cigarette or a joint, whatever, if somebody chooses to come in here and consume that or just be in the general space, that's entirely up to them. We actually had to have a conversation with somebody last week who wanted to bring their service dog in. And I said, look, this is your service dog, but this is in a room that is filled with smoke. There really is not much fresh air in here relative to, you bringing that animal into this space. And we also don't want to encroach upon discrimination. You can't look at somebody and tell if they're pregnant or not. Maybe they're just eating really, really good, or they've had, too many beers over the last couple of decades. So we really leave it up to the consumer where they have to make educated decisions for themselves, with the added layer of you're signing that liability waiver. Anything that you would potentially want to blame us for, we are, absolved of any indemnification there.
Mhm. Thank you. And the last question I have, and maybe Brian, you can kind of give us some insight on this one. So it's a specific question. For an emerging THC beverage brand, what's the most effective entry point into cannabis tourism? Would you suggest approaching a hospitality group or a destination operation? I think they're looking for some guidance.
Yeah. My first question would be back to them about like, what's your strategic priorities of, and how are you measuring success and the basic baseline. So I know who the client or who the person is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think where I stand now is, if let's just assume that they're looking at, having a presence in the legal cannabis retail lounge market, and that's where they see where they want their beverage positioned and placed. My instinct would be to, well, one, follow the data, which shows the appetite for non-inhalation consumption, which again, that's the growth area, I think, of a lot of the industry. Also from a dosing perspective, I'm a big fan of, like, believe it or not, like, start the 1 milligram and let people go on a journey to understand their, their what do they call it? Their therapeutic dosing level for what exactly that means for them on their journey with cannabis and THC specifically. And the idea of having, I think one of the exciting futures of this with lounges is having really tight lounge programs that Spencer and Jag look at and they're like, damn, this brand's sophisticated. They're not only bringing like a great product, they're bringing a program. They're going to show up. They're going to activate my lounge. They're going to be helping me have a new narrative to develop new partnerships in creative ways. They're going to be reaching maybe an extension of a demographic that, is there a capacity where we have a non-inhalation, just like the quiet swim hours, right? Where it's like the non-inhalation consumption window where this brand can show up and offer a new experience with a low dose beverage that a hotel might be like, what? That's a thing? It's a non-inhalation, And I think those kind of stories coming alive in lounges. So if I was a beverage brand, I would focus on you really zeroing in, following the data, finding the lounge partners that have the vision and the appetite for this, and believe that it's not going to disrupt their current successful business model, or perhaps help them survive if they don't understand how to utilize a lounge.
Yeah, if I can add to that, if you are a cannabis derived beverage brand coming into the Jersey market, you should be talking to lounges already. There's a bunch of things that we are missing in our business models. We've talked about food and beverage a lot. But when you look at THC beverages, that is something that humans have been experiencing for decades and decades. It's a normal part of society. You're at a networking event, you're at a cocktail event, you're at a family barbecue. Everybody has a beverage in hand, whether it is alcohol, virgin, now THC beverages are everywhere. It's a normal part of socialization, and lounges exist primarily to socialize, whether it's with your immediate group or you're there for a larger event. Adding in beverages as an additional layer to consumption, or it is the focal point of consumption, means that your beverages can potentially be in everybody's hands. If I'm sitting here with a group of people and we're packing the bong, we bought a couple eighths and we're getting high, one, we want to wet our whistles. I can't currently sell you a drink anyway. This is a great, thing to add in. But that extra 5 milligrams helps just to push that experience a little bit higher if you want that extra little oomph behind what you're doing. If you're not just being used as an upsell opportunity for people that want to consume and want a little extra something else, beverages open up an entire opportunity to curate experiences around that beverage. There's a reason that all your big liquor brands are still having promo, girls go out and hand out koozies and, bottle openers and stuff like that at bars. They want to engage. They want to get their product into people's hands. And when you can add something else to it to either be the natural draw of, hey, you're coming for this event and we're going to sponsor it with beverages, or we're, launching our beverages and we're going to add these activations to further elevate it. There's multiple ways to approach that, but beverages are something that are woven into the fabric of everything else we do at a society. You go to a concert, you go to a sports game, you go to a casino, you go to the beach, you're damn right everybody has a drink in their hand. If you're bringing that to market, lounges should be one of your main 2 priorities, because this is the space that is built to benefit from something like that. Like Brian was just saying, not everybody wants to smoke or can smoke. Not everybody is interested in smoking every time they visit the lounge. People are looking to try new things. There's so much opportunity and so much potential there. There's really no right or wrong. Part of the fun is exploring all of, what will be ultimately right or wrong, or what possible, opportunities have worked better than others. But if you're not looking at every opportunity to get your beverage into somebody's hand, you're missing out on countless, chances to build your brand, drive revenue, and get your product into people's hands.
Mhm.
Right. And I think I'll close with sort of a selfish personal question. Brian, you've mentioned, you've referenced some research that you have done, some data-led conclusions that you're sharing with us today. Where could somebody get access to that research? What are some resources that you'd recommend?
I would honestly send me an email. I'm happy to drop it in the chat. I have the kind of the slides that I'm able to publicly share, which is a snapshot of the deeper research. Where the juice really comes in is the different segmentation below it of like wellness, connoisseur, kind of curious, the dollar amount they spend, but also their what we call their motivating factors. One of those, just to tie into Spencer's last comment about beverages, is when we did this foundational research in 2019, announced it in 2020, and measure it every year since, we followed this audience shift. Part of the methodology of this survey was a matrix of about 25 different experiences, from spa CBD massages to beverages to tastings and samplings, and what are all the ways that cannabis can express itself within an experience environment. And out of all the experiences that motivate this audience, the number 2 experience is a curated sampling or tasting. And a retail transaction is not even in the top 5. So when it comes to the cannabis motivated travel audience, number 2 out of all those activities today is they want to experience a curated sampling or tasting experience. So I think that lends really well. The exciting part about that data existing now over 5 years with a brand like MMGY behind it, if I can also just point that out, they're well known in the travel industry as credible research. So being able to, once somebody like Spencer has a curated beverage sampling or tasting as an ongoing program in his lounge, showing that data to the destination organizations, the hotels, to show that you're kind of mirroring back to them how they think and speak and measure and understand their audiences for that industry. All of a sudden you become this partner that thinks beyond a cannabis consumer, and you think of a cannabis motivated travel audience.
And Brian, I know in LinkedIn you often put your newsletter out there. And whenever that pops up, I always read that because that has good snippets about cannabis, hospitality, and tourism. It's not too long. It's always interesting. So follow Brian on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And I usually throw a data point in there too. So
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess I'll hand that over to Jane to wrap us up.
Well, Rob, thank you again for moderating such an enlightening panel. I really enjoyed the diversity of the panelists this year with different experiences and different backgrounds. I think it was an excellent panel. Thank you to Louisa, Jag, Brian, and Spencer for joining us and sharing your expertise. And thank you to our audience for spending the whole time with us. No one really dropped off. So that's a good sign that people really enjoyed what you were saying. And I hope that you'll join other light events in the future. And have a wonderful day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all.